Everyone, this is Chase Pounds. Happy Juneteenth. Now, I have done 2 Juneteenth videos so far since 2022, and I like to start my video like I always said before. The origin, the story of Juneteenth goes back since the end of the Civil War, when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, supposedly guaranteeing freedom for every enslaved person, and that slavery would be no more in the land of the free. And despite this, yet some areas of the South of the Confederacy withheld the information that of freedom and emancipation, and kept many of the blacks as slaves, and many of them kept working, not knowing that they were free, truly free. And in places such as Galveston, Texas, one of the last states to free its slaves, and that's what Juneteenth commemorates, when on June the 19th, 1865, that the last of the slaves were finally free, meaning freedom for all the slaves in the United States as a whole. And from that point on, Juneteenth has been celebrated just as the same treatment as before July: picnics, barbecues, festivals, honoring heritage. And to some people, and even to this day, Juneteenth is kind of elusive. It's mainly because as I found out that Juneteenth, even though it was very popular towards the end of the Civil War, well into the 20th century, there was kind of a pause during the 60s as people were focusing on the main issue of civil rights and integration, and during that period, mostly Juneteenth was kind of dormant. The celebration of Juneteenth was kind of dwindling in a way but then it was somewhat of a resurgence during the 70s, when there was a resurgence of new interest in appreciating African arts and culture in the 70s, in the post-civil rights era. And places such as Milwaukee, and that's where my mother had her exposure to Juneteenth as a kid. Traditionally celebrate Juneteenth, and other places. But it's only in recent years following the George Floyd incident, that there was a renewed awakening towards the celebration of Juneteenth. And Juneteenth is celebrated today all over the U.S., even some parts of Mexico, it turns out. But what I'm going to be discussing about is about San Francisco, blacks in San Francisco. This was happened to be based off a documentary I had watched. That was a PBS documentary by Ossie Davis, known as The History of Fillmore Street, which was Fillmore was mostly black district neighborhood, which and just prior to me watching this documentary, I was also reading the article really, well, I was for my video for Juneteenth, I was really going to be discussing about Oprah Lee, who was a Texas native, about her push to make Juneteenth a federal holiday, which she became known as Grandmother Juneteenth. But this particular story I watched on YouTube, again as a PBS documentary narrated by Ossie Davis, it kind of stood out to me. But prior to just watching the documentary, I was learning about Juneteenth was celebrated as far as San Francisco, which kind of surprised me because I don't think of many blacks. Really, I don't place a lot of blacks blacks and black history with San Francisco. I actually read in was kind of researching that a couple years back about blacks residing in San Francisco. What I gathered, it was like a little article. It was like when I googled it, it said that blacks didn't come to San Francisco until the 1970s, which was interesting. And I thought that it may have been because a lot of blacks may have been restricted from going into San Francisco, which was common in other places, cities in the West Coast, including Portland, Oregon. The state of Portland, Oregon, the state of Portland, Oregon, had an infamous law of restricting blacks, both free and slave, from coming to that territory. And this remained well into the 20th century, even as it became a state up to 1926, that blacks were not allowed to come to Oregon according to hidden colors. But from watching this documentary, as it turns out, there were a lot of blacks that lived in San Francisco. In a way, it was almost like the West Coast version of Harlem. The Western edition, as it was sometimes known as Fillmore's district. In a way, it could also be looked at as well as somewhat of another Black Wall Street, just like in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Though it had a lot of its black-owned businesses, both gift stores, stores, restaurants, barbershops, clothing stores, some churches, neighborhood. It was like a kind of thriving neighborhood, prominent neighborhood of the West Coast in San Francisco. And it really attracted, Fillmore's district really attracted many of the all the different races, ethnic groups, going back to the neighborhood's founding, going back to the turn of the century, and it was one of the surviving districts that survived the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, which that also was, I was curious about were there any blacks that were around during the turn of the century during the San Francisco earthquake. I never came across any information to support that, but I'm not surprised there were. So much of our history is lost. Just like I recently found out there in recent years, I found out that there was a black passenger that was on the Titanic, or I should say a Haitian passenger on the Titanic, and it started off as a district for all the different ethnic races, for the Jewish, starting with the Jewish, as well as Irish, then the Asian Americans, which I'm kind of familiar with that many of the Asian Americans came through San Francisco, which is mostly San Francisco's Chinatown, and New York has their own version of a Chinatown, and even my hometown, just find out we had our own Chinatown at one point in time, and even though there's a small number of blacks that did reside in San Francisco prior to the outbreak of World War II, and during the outbreak of World War II, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, many Japanese Americans, Asian Americans were forcibly removed out of their neighborhoods and onto a train to internment camps in Arizona, or somewhere in the Southwest, after was seen as a danger, a threat to national security and the safety of America at the end of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And this has often been considered a darkest period in history with race relations, along with slavery, the Holocaust, and other such atrocities. And it's the first time that in the Fillmore district that many of the ethnic races were forced to leave their neighborhoods. And while many of the Japanese Americans left, it was by this point that many blacks started migrating known as the second wave of migration, that many blacks started moving to the west coast for the first time, including Los Angeles, which that's what I'm mostly familiar with, and San Francisco, which I never really did too much research on people migrating to Los Angeles. And many of the blacks moved to the Fillmore district where once the Japanese Americans lived, and they settled there and started their own new lives there, and started their own community, thriving communities. A lot of times, sometimes renting out renting apartments temporarily, attracting many people that came and went. Many stayed and made their own community in Fillmore, San Francisco, and by the end of the war, World War II had ended. Many of the Asian Japanese Americans came back only to find that their neighborhood wasn't the same as it used to be, as more blacks moved in. Black Americans had moved into their neighborhoods. Some stayed, some left and tried to find their housing elsewhere. By the end of the war, millions of thousands of blacks migrated to San Francisco, many from parts of the deep western part of the Deep South.
And now for the Duluth
many from the Deep South, such as Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, migrated to San Francisco in the prominent district of Fillmore, which would become. Though again, also, as I said, Juneteenth was starting Galveston, Texas, so many probably took the tradition of Juneteenth with them to Fillmore. And but even though as more blacks started selling in the city, many of the buildings that were around during the turn of the century and withstood the San Francisco earthquake in 1906, many of the buildings started to age and started deteriorating as more people occupied the buildings, and it was very many times packed. And with this, it just made the neighborhood have kind of made the neighborhood kind of look bad, and then look very prominent. And this was, by this point, in the World War II, there was a push not just in San Francisco but nationwide as a push to tear down as I say undesirable neighborhoods into freeway system, as the urges of the interstate system began to take root during the post-war American years, as more people started driving cars. This became a push in many urban areas to I should say as a phenomenon known as urban renewal, to try to make cities look, I guess, pleasant and more better and more modernized, and more thriving. But though this wasn't just the case in San Francisco, as I said, but also in other places including Tulsa, Oklahoma, which I had mentioned before in another video, was at the site of a 1921 race riot. In late years, it also was the victim of urban renewal, as a freeway was built over the formerly black community. A lot of times, these urban renewal projects were targeted mostly in historically black prominent neighborhoods, including here in St. Louis, and that was also the case with the Chinatown I had mentioned. mentioned, yet even though Fillmore was still thriving, it attracted many celebrities to the perspective of many of the black residents. It attracted many famous celebrities such as Harris Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Ray Charles, Dizzy Gillespie, many of the jazz artists at the time, of the jazz era. And people in this documentary described how people were very clean, dressed to the nines, suited and booted, with dress suits, tuxedos, dress hats, evening gowns, and so forth. But yet this would come to an end as by the late 50s, the city was starting to be condemned for the renewal project. It'll be over time in the 60s that more renewal projects continued in the Fillmore district when it became less of a thriving neighborhood and more of a slum, a ghetto. And it was pushed to try to preserve the neighborhood, to keep history alive. And people wanted to have, the black residents wanted to have say in the matter of keeping the neighborhood. But unfortunately, they were unsuccessful as they continued to build more apartment complexes, and many times they weren't affordable for many of the former residents, where many ended up leaving, and the community of Fillmore dwindled. And it got worse and worse through the 60s into the 70s. It was even a site of racial riots in the tumultuous late 60s during the era of Vietnam protests, assassinations, and achieving civil rights. James Baldwin also toured Fillmore in '63. Unfortunately, neighborhood will continue to go downhill as more people turn to crime because of lack of job opportunities, and were strong. Many of them started turning to drugs and became drug addicts. Drugs further making the neighborhood look bad to what it was formerly used to be. And from that point on, the neighborhood never recovered. And many of those who lived in Fillmore were also took in the 1978 Jim Jones massacre, Colt massacre. Many of the people who attended the church feeling a sense of optimism, a sense of new hope with the new preacher, evangelical preacher, but yet would be sucked into the cult. Sucked into the occultness and fall victim to the infamous Red Kool-Aid genocide in Africa. And from that point, as I mentioned before, Fillmore continued to go downhill, even though there were attempts to programs that tried to restore it. Yet many of the new residents that started to live in the new era were mostly white. And this is a phenomenon known as gentrification, where more white, were more the common reverse of white flight, which white flight is a phenomenon, and this occurred in my neighborhood that I live in, where when whites leave out of a predominantly nice neighborhood, that blacks start moving in, and then the community goes bad, the neighborhood goes bad because of lack of care and lack of, teaching and experiences of taking care of property. And though with the case of Fillmore, it was the exact opposite. Many blacks started leaving, and many of the whites started moving into the once black neighborhood, or once ethnically diverse neighborhood. There's still a few businesses, but it's not the same as it used to be. Few people still live in the neighborhood or live near it, or visit it, but it's not the Fillmore of his glory days. It was a thriving black community to some. I think they could have did more by just preserving the buildings and kind of keeping them up to date, restoring them instead of trying to tear them down. Some of the buildings did survive, some were relocated into different parts of San Francisco, and I'd like to know where those buildings reside now. And this is again a story I'm not really familiar with and never been taught in school. Just like with many other events, such as the Black Wall Street Massacre. Even though this wasn't a Black Wall Street that fell victim to a race riot, it fell victim to fell victim to urban renewal, a more passive form of racism. But this is an event that really stood out and I thought was interesting. And I feel like it kind of relates to the Black American struggle, even though it was not struggle and what it means to celebrate Juneteenth. And this was a subject that really kind of really stuck on my mind. I felt it's very sad and depressing that occurred. And that's all I had to say on the subject. This is another video by Chase Pounds. Happy Juneteenth, and stay tuned for my next video. Feel free to subscribe.